Who knows? Sam Lewis is a political commentator with Young Voices UK. Morning to you, Sam.
Morning, Christo, and if we're still saying it, Happy New Year.
No. Sorry. Well, actually, today is the last day I'll accept it being said. Then that's it. From tomorrow, we're moving on. Today, do you know what as well? I'm ripping down the Christmas tree at home today as well, Sam. Do you know that? I really am. I said to him indoors, I said, it's going. And he said, no, we can keep it another week. I said, it's going. If anyone's listening, I'm joking. I'm making a very silly little joke. All right, Sam Lewis. Let's talk about the Tory polls, because we were just exploring it with Sven and Mike. But, I mean, the Conservative obsession with net zero, a restriction on our freedoms constantly, this tax rises, high spending. I mean, we voted blue. Well, I didn't vote blue, but many people voted blue, and they've ended up with a sort of disgusting, sludgy colour of red and green, rather than an actual Conservative government. And now the polling is showing that. Do you agree?
Look, I mean, for the last 3 months of last year, I mean, it just seemed Boris Johnson lost his grip on the party, and it's sort of just gone in the wrong direction because he has no vision really for the country. And you sort of hope that this year he'll find a way to improve things. But I fear, with interest rates increasing, with inflation going up, with, as you mentioned, tax rises, household bills are going to go up 600 quid. The Resolution Foundation found the other day, energy bills are going up, and it's definitely not the right direction. And you can see why the polls are dipping, and why there's a 8 percentage point difference between the two.
I mean, I don't know your political persuasion, Sam, but are you a traditional sort of Tory voter? Are you a person that would normally be voting for them?
Yeah, look, I consider myself centre right, fiscally conservative, liberally, socially liberal.
Okay,
but,
so how when you are essentially their core support, how do you feel about the direction of the party? How do you feel about Boris Johnson's ideology, if he has one?
Look, it's hard to place his ideology, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think that the Tory party, needs to get a grip, and there needs to be a new chief whip, for one, to get, the 2019 is at least to understand their opinion and get it to the top of government. But I'm not happy where the government is at the moment, but I don't think many people are, even of my persuasion. I would still vote Tory, but it's because the alternatives are just so much worse. But that's not necessarily a good reason. It's just how our democracy works.
Then how could they get? Because if they're not getting the faith of people like you, then they haven't got a hope in hell of getting people to vote for them who wouldn't normally vote for them. I mean, he had a very handy little catchphrase at the last election, "Get Brexit done," which turned out to be a huge lie and turned out to be completely based on a pack of lies. Now, when you go into the next election, how is he going to be bringing over that red wall? How is he going to be convincing people?
Look, I think the reason I give him the benefit of the doubt, and I have done for the last 2 years, is ultimately because of coronavirus. This is a crisis. This is once in 100 years crisis, and I've been thinking, for the last 2 years, even though he's been more happy to be, use the hand of the state, even though taxes have increased, we do have to pay off the debt, and the debt has skyrocketed because of the coronavirus, and it was necessary to put in the measures in place. Nobody thinks that World War II was a bad idea after 2 years, and therefore we give up and therefore go back to pre-war spending, because we would have lost the war in the end. This is a war against coronavirus. We need to beat it. But the fact that there are other things such as increasing national insurance, these aren't conservative values, and it seems a lot of the time he just follows headlines, which is the issue now.
But aren't you respectfully contradicting yourself there? Because if he was an ideologically sound leader, if he was a person who had the moral fibre to have an opinion on something, which I don't believe Boris Johnson has ever had an opinion on anything, because he always wants to follow the pack rather than be a leader, everything falls from that. And I keep making this point, and maybe I'm naive, but if you have a leader that is absolutely ideologically set in stone as to what they believe the role of government should be, of course there are going to be exceptions to that. Of course there are going to be times where, when there is a crisis, you have to, you have to adapt. We saw that a lot with Thatcher. Thatcher wouldn't love spending money, but when it came to the Falklands, a crisis, she did. The problem is, because Boris doesn't have any kind of ideology, because he doesn't actually believe in anything other than Boris Johnson, his decisions don't come from that. And so, you're talking about sort of high taxes. You're talking about, when Boris has had the chance to prove that he has an ideology over and above coronavirus, he hasn't had one. He hasn't had one.
Boris Johnson will be around for the next 3 years. I know you're one of his biggest fans, but look, if Liz Truss
he will not be prime minister for the next election.
If Liz Truss is going to launch a campaign, which seems that people seem to be thinking she's the next best leader, within Tory party polling, it seems that she's preferred candidate. Look, she's in favour of relaxing immigration rules with India in order to get a trade deal, and I'm all for that. I think we should relax immigration rules in order to have a bigger trade deal with India and use it as a geopolitical strategic way to secure close ties with them and move away from China. But a lot of the red wallers, they won't like it. A lot of people that vote for Brexit will not like this.
Well, no, because that's going to make Brexit completely pointless. If you want to get rid of why would you get rid of free movement with our closest trade place to trade with, where we would get the most benefit, to then have free movement for a place further away? You're having the sacrifice of free movement, but you're not getting the same benefits you'd have got from having free movement from your nearest trade partners.
Well, the difference is we can now control immigration, right? So we can increase immigration to suit our needs. So it doesn't necessarily mean decreasing immigration. But, let's not get back into the Brexit arguments.
But I think it does tie into why people voted for that. And I think if I was one of those red wall voters, I think you make a very good point about the Indian trade. And if I was a red wall voter that had voted for Brexit because I was annoyed at the way in which my town had changed, the different people coming in, wages going down, all of those sorts of things, I would feel incredibly, I would feel that I had been incredibly duped by the fact that now we're talking about somewhere else having those benefits and potentially the same problems occurring.
No, absolutely understandable. But, if we're talking about if Boris is going to, survive and the Tory party are going to survive, look, the next elections are going to happen for the next 3 years. But I don't think that if people are saying, let's look for an alternative, let's look for someone who's more conservative and who has conservative values. I mean, Liz Truss is a conservative. She just believes in greater immigration.
No, right? But I don't think she's probably the right person. I mean, I like Rishi. He's an adult in the room. He actually, is able to hold a conversation.
Well, what do you think of, he's driven these tax rises as well?
No, so I don't want anyone from the cabinet. I don't want anyone from the cabinet. I want someone who, again, I know I'm probably a bit obsessed and perhaps I'm a bit tainted by my obsession with Thatcher, but I want someone like her who says, you know what, I'm standing because I hate the direction we're going in. I'm standing because it's the right thing to do. And all of these people in the cabinet, they've all sat there and nodded along like, obedient donkeys with Boris.
I'm not sure Margaret Thatcher would be a prime minister nowadays. The thing is, in the 80s, it was very different. You had Ronald Reagan running the United States. You had Mrs. Thatcher running, United Kingdom. And I'm a big fan of Mrs. Thatcher, don't get me wrong. But the 1980s was very different. That was after the 60s and 70s of decline.
But I'm not saying it necessarily needs to have her particular ideology, though I agree with much of it, but it needs to be someone that says, I'm not standing for my self-interest. I'm not standing because or I'm not someone that's just kept quiet and let Boris hang himself. It's someone who has to have such an ideological depth of feeling and such a passion about the wrong direction that the country's going in, that they say, I have to put my name forward. And at the moment, because all of these people in the cabinet have sat by whilst we've had tax rises, whilst we've had our freedoms restricted, whilst we've had an obsession with net zero, I don't trust any of them, really. I mean, there are a few sort of least worst options, like probably Rishi, but I don't trust any of them because they've all sat by. Not one of them has resigned. Not one of them has said, only Lord Frost, and he resigned really over the terrible Brexit deal he himself negotiated. That was really what that was about. But none of the cabinet have said, well, you know what, I cannot tolerate the direction in which we're going in, because they're all self-serving. They all care about their own careers rather than the actual ideology and direction of the country. And that's why we need someone from the backbenches. I'll give you the final word.
Who's standing up to it? Who's really going for it? You know, we're talking about Blair and the knighthood. You know, he won 3 elections in a row. The question is, can Boris win the next election? That's all the Conservative Party really cares about. Is about staying.
But I don't think he can. I don't think he can.
But it's 3 years to the next election. You know, polls go up and down. It could still happen. It depends. You know, there could be a leadership election at some point. There might not be. But at the moment, unfortunately, it's the least worst option case. That's just how it is.
Well, as you will know, we've got to leave it there, but it's 100 years this year since the formation of the 1922 committee, which, of course, can oust Boris. I wonder how they'll celebrate their centenary. We'll have to keep an eye. Sam Lewis, good to talk to you.